So, hi everybody. Welcome to Wednesday night at Mountain View. I'm glad you're all here. And we're going to start. I'm going to pray, and then Allie's going to lead us in worship songs, three songs. And you have to bear with her because she got shots in both arms yesterday. So they gave her a COVID shot in one arm and a flu shot in the other. So she's half and half in it right now. She's got a little bit of both. So, anyways, all right, let's pray, and then we'll just hear what God has for us. Thanks so much, God, for bringing us together. I ask that you just be with Allie and bring all of us into your presence. Meet with us now. Be pleased with our form of worship. Encourage every heart and show us wonderful things in your word tonight. In Jesus' name, amen.
Before I spoke a word, you were singing over me. You have been so, so good to me. Before I took a breath, you breathed your life in me. You have been so, so kind to me. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found, leaves the 99. I couldn't earn it, and I don't deserve it. Still you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. When I was your foe, still your love fought for me. You have been so, so good to me. When I felt no worth, you paid it all for me. You have been so, so kind to me. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found, leaves the 99. And I couldn't earn it, and I don't deserve it. Still you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Do you think I'm going to get confused like that? I don't want to get confused. What is that first line? stronger than the power of the grave, constant in the trial and the change. This one thing remains, one thing remains. Your love never fails, it never gives up, it never runs out on me. Your love never fails, it never gives up, it never runs out on me. 'Cause on and on and on and on it goes, and it overwhelms and satisfies my soul. And I never ever have to be afraid, 'cause this one thing remains. In death, in life, I'm confident and covered by the power of your great love. My debt is paid, there's nothing that can separate my heart from your great love. 'Cause on and on and on and on it goes. Yes, it overwhelms and satisfies my soul. I'll never ever have to be afraid. It's one thing remains. On and on and on and on it goes. Yes, it overwhelms and satisfies my soul. Never ever have to be afraid, 'cause one thing remains. One thing remains. Okay, so now I'm gonna do a song that I learned when we were up in camp in Gualala. So yeah, it's a new one. As the Spirit was moving over the water, Spirit, come move over us. Come rest on us. Come rest on us. As the Spirit was moving over the water, Spirit, come move over us. Come rest on us. Come rest on us. So calm down, Spirit, when you move, you make my heart pound. When you fill the room, you're here and I know you are moving. I'm here and I know you feel me, so calm down. Spirit, when you move, you make my heart pound. When you fill the room, you're here and I know you are moving. I'm here and I know you feel me. So calm down, Spirit, when you move, you make my heart pound. When you fill the room, you're here and I know you are moving. I'm here and I know you will feel me. Calm down, Spirit, when you move, you make my heart pound. When you fill the room, you're here and I know you will move me. I'm here and I know you will feel me. Fire and wind, come and do it again. Open up the gates, let heaven on in. Come rest on us. Come rest on us. Fire and wind, come and do it again. Open up the gates, let heaven on in. Come rest on us. Come rest on us. Holy Spirit, come rest. Come rest on us. Come rest on us.
Okay. Thank you, Allie. The tonight we're going to continue our series of apologetic type topics. And a couple weeks ago, I spoke and talked about the moral argument for God. And then last Wednesday, Eric talked about God and creation and intelligent design and things like that. Tonight, Doug is here, and he's going to be talking about essentially the historical evidence and the scriptural basis for the actual event of the Exodus of Moses and the Israelites. And the key reason that I wanted him to come and do this talk is because he got to go there. What was it, last year? Was it 3 years ago? Oh my goodness, I didn't realize it was that long. But yeah, so he actually got to go to Egypt on a trip and see some of this stuff. So he's actually got firsthand experience in addition to being able to do the research. So let's just welcome Doug and hear what God's given him for us tonight.
Wouldn't need it. There we go. Thank you, brother. So, hi. It's good to be back at Mountain View. I've missed you guys. We are on assignment in Kernville, Lake Isabella at this time, and Sherry and I have taken a church for a season, helped them call a pastor. So it is God's country. It's a beautiful place. We love it up there. It's a good church. They seem to like me. We've been there a month, and so I certainly love them. They're good people, a good serving church to be with. I don't know how long we're going to be there, but we're there for as long as they need us or want us. And so that's kind of the job of an intentional interim, is to go and take care of this part of church. I don't like to get involved in admin stuff or day-to-day running the church. They do have an apartment. Sherry and I go up usually Friday or Saturday morning, and we stay until Monday. They have a real cute little apartment. Sherry says it's cute. I think it's cool. It's upstairs, and I can see the lake, and it's a pretty nice little place for us to stay. They bought a new king bed, so I'm happy. The Wi-Fi works well, and it has a flat screen. I got everything I need. Has an actual pretty good kitchen that works well for us, so we're glad you can keep us in our prayers. If you want to look at the website, it is Kernville Baptist Church. If you want to see me preach through Titus, then we'll suffer through it together. I actually feel like this is probably the third time that I preached through Titus. It gets better for me every time. I don't know if it gets better for y'all, but I'm certainly enjoying it. Exodus 20. The beginning of Exodus 20 starts off, and it says, is somebody going to run my PowerPoints? Oh, there we go. Who's doing that? Oh, you're here. Okay, good. So because you don't have a script, I'll just say Molly, okay? Oh, Lynn's doing it. Okay, Lynn, go one more slide. That's good. Go one more slide. And God spoke all these words, saying, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. The Israelites had been delivered from a very polytheistic society for hundreds of years. Actually, it goes back almost 400 years. You know, if we went back 400 years, it's to the Pilgrims. All right, what has happened in America since the Pilgrims landed at Plymouth Rock? All right, America has actually been populated and born, and trends have come and gone, and centuries it has taken to become the America that we are today. And that is the length of time that the Israelites were in were in Egypt or in captivity in Egypt, and their cultures merged. All right, they merged so much that the Egyptian culture, a lot of it had essentially become part of Israel. Not completely, but there was that influence of Egyptian paganism, and it greatly influenced. And the God that they were seeing today is not like any God that they had seen in Egypt. I kind of looked at this before, and every Egyptian god had an image to the Egyptians. The god of the sun, the rivers, they had a god of everything, and every one of it, you kind of knew what he was supposed to look like. All right, and so here Israel is serving an unseen God that they can see what he does and how he cares for them, but there isn't an image to look at when we talk about Yahweh, when we talk about God. All the other gods in Israel were visible, and Israel had witnessed so much happening to them. The plagues. Israel witnessed the plagues and were not involved in it. The plagues would come and fall on Israel, and right across the street. Have you ever been? We were in Atlanta a few times, and I remember Sherry and I before our kids were born. Sherry and I trucked together, and we would park someplace in Atlanta, and it was raining in the cab of the truck, but it wasn't at the back of the truck. And that's kind of like Atlanta. It would go across. It'd be raining across the street, but not over here. And I thought that was so unusual. It reminded me of the plagues, how they infested the Egyptian part of the city, and yet it didn't touch the Israelites. That's a miracle, because one of the plagues was flies. Remember? Have you ever tried to control a fly? All right, you can't find it really in your kitchen when you're looking for it, and yet God can control all of the elements exactly where he wants to. Miracles. They'd witnessed the miracle of Passover, the parting of the Red Sea, the pillar of fire, and the results of God revealing himself to Israel without showing himself to them, because no one could survive. Let's look at a timeline of the Exodus, all right? To see that timeline, you can hold it right there, Lynn. To see that timeline of Israel, we know from Scripture that the Israelites cried out to God in their misery. They were tired and sore and broken, and they were worked. Being a slave to the Egyptians, if the Hebrew, the Israelite people being a slave to the Egyptians, wasn't like, I think sometimes we think about the most modern scene that we have is probably Nazism in Germany, all right, where they worked people in captivity to death. That was the point of Nazism, of the Nazis, was to work. It was all part of the concentration system, to work you to death. We're going to kill you, we might as well get some days out of it, right? The problem, the difference between the Egyptian slavery is that a slave was a valuable entity. We needed to keep you alive. We didn't want to work you to death. We wanted to work you close to death. They didn't starve you out. You might be responsible to feed the Egyptians first, but then after that you could feed yourself. You might be responsible to hunt for the Egyptians first, but then you could go and glean for yourself. You might be responsible to make clothing and garment for the Egyptians first, but then you could go take care of yourself, staying alive. And here's what happens when a culture is like that. The people that are working twice as hard are becoming twice as strong. And the people who are relying on those people to do all their stuff are becoming soft and weak, and their most interesting thing that they do all day is entertainment, gambling, gaming, betting. Sound familiar? I wonder in America if we had to feed ourselves, what would we do? Because if Stater Brothers and Vaughn's and Winco, the shelves were empty, and we've kind of had that scare lately, haven't we? All right, that's some empty shelves in a grocery store. We're not used to that in our lifetimes, are we? We're used to going into Stater Brothers, and there's plenty of toilet paper. I'll get some next time. Right? There's plenty of canned goods. There's plenty, and it seems like in these times that we live in, there's shortages and empty shelves, and most of them are self-created by greed. But so is that. But what would we do if you had to can peaches tomorrow? Do you know how? I don't know how. And you think, well, I'll just Google it. Listen, if you have to Google it to find out, it's already too late because you're already out of food. All right, and so the point of the slaves in Egypt is that generationally, their grandparents and their grandparents and their grandparents and their grandparents had been in slavery to Egypt in this society that there was no way out. There was no choices. You were doing the same thing that your ancestors had done for them. And you were not going to evolve into something higher. You would die a slave doing somebody else's bidding. Israel has been enslaved and cries out to God. And God calls Moses to return and lead Israel out. You know the story of Moses, of approaching the burning bush and God speaking to him. And at 40 years old, he escaped. And now at 80 years old, God says, you're going back. And Moses he knows he's talking to God, and he understands that, but he starts to argue with God. And God makes it clear that, Moses, you are going, or it's probably your last days. God doesn't give him a consequence factor, but Moses kind of knows. You're standing on holy ground. You might be standing on really risky a place. God has approached you, and you need to do what God has called you to do. Moses goes to Moses goes to Egypt. And eventually we all know that it brought the plagues upon Egypt. And the plagues it got worse and worse and worse and more dynamic until finally the death angel came and took the firstborn sons of all of Egypt. And there was mourning. And finally, Pharaoh let the people go. Yeah. Right? You know, there's a good song about that. And Pharaoh let the people go, and Moses led them out of Egypt and out of captivity, and he led them to where we are today, to Sinai. There's, click a slide, Lynn. Let's see what we got. This is me in Egypt. This is my friend Rosha. Rosha went everywhere Sherry and I went for 4 days. While we were on the Nile, we took a 4-day Nile. Part of our journey was a 4-day Nile cruise, and he was with Sherry and I everywhere we went. I think, as near as I could tell, that's like a 40 caliber machine pistol. I believe it's left over from the Syrian-Egyptian war, probably in the 70s. All right, we talked a lot, but I didn't want to really investigate his gun too much. I didn't want to appear like that's just something that I deal with every day. It's an armed guard walking around with us. The armor in Egypt is, all the bullets are always facing out. So I was glad to be on the right side of the bullet. The reason that we had armed guard is because one dead, stabbed, robbed, killed American is worth millions in tourism. Egypt relies solely on tourism to make their billions of dollars. They do have some oil. They do have the Suez Canal. Those are all good things that generate revenue, but they don't have the oil like the rest of the Middle East. Egypt relies on tourism, and it is a multi-billion dollar thing yearly. You can imagine during COVID how Egypt dried up. Nobody went in. Now there's a war. All right, I was glad to go in January 23 because it was a short time of peace that Sherry and I could go and experience some of this. One more slide, Lynn. On the third new moon, so this is Moses leading the Hebrew people, the Israelites, out of captivity into the wilderness. On the third new moon, after the people of Israel had gone out of the land of Egypt, on that day, they came to the wilderness of Sinai. And they set out from Rephidim and came to the wilderness of Sinai. And they encamped in the wilderness. They encamped before the mountains. It took them, relatively from Cairo to Sinai is about 180 miles. Cairo is where the pyramids are. Cairo, modern Cairo, is probably the seat of government close to it, where the pharaohs were, where the capital of this was. It's 180 miles from there to Sinai. For us, it was about an 8-hour bus ride. All right, normally in a bus, we're used to getting on American freeways, and if you get in the Greyhound, all right, he goes 70 to 75 miles an hour. All right, you should be able to accomplish 180 miles in about 2.5 to 3 hours, depending on whether that bus stop's in Bakersfield and Barstow and Merced. How many times the bus stops? But it doesn't take 100. It took a long time because infrastructure in Egypt today is messed up. There are freeways, but there's hundreds of people walking on the freeways. There's carts pulled by donkeys in the center of the freeway going the wrong way, coming at you, a donkey cart. And we're in a bus. There are people, when they get on the freeway, they go up the off-ramp and turn left. They go down the off-ramp, never. They just get off wherever they go. It's totally insane. I could not believe the way the infrastructure in Egypt is. And the problem is all the bullets are pointing out. There are no police, only armies that protect us. So here we come to Sinai. And Sinai is a natural place where it is easy to secure 2 million people. I don't know exactly how many Israelites there were. There's some discussion about it. There could have been as many as 1 million men, so 1 million families. I watched some stuff this week trying to figure out how do you get 1 million people to walk 180 miles? And there really is no solution to that. All right, the solution is that it should take, if Scott and I and Nate took off walking, we're not going to get there. Okay, that's the bottom line. But if young, healthy individuals that walk and are able to walk, they should be able to walk 20 miles a day. So you should be able to accomplish this journey in 9 days. We see here they're in 3 months. So moving 1 million people, I watched this thing on Rome's legions today, and a legion of 50,000 with 50,000 support, so 100,000 Romans that are used to marching every day, all right, and march 20 miles a day, all right, the scouts and the vanguard, the front of the column of Romans, is at the new camp before the donkeys and the porters have left the old camp. All right, so actually 100,000 soldiers marching 4 abreast and 4 miles an hour, they are at the place before the other ones have left. All right, so imagine 20 times that amount. And we're not talking about regimented army soldiers. We're talking about old folks, babies, regular people, middle age, all marching together, all going somewhere. What in the heck did they make 2 miles a day? Well, actually, that would have been a good day to march a couple of million people across Sinai. I don't know what logistically it looked like. Perhaps God sustained them, but it was a difficult journey for them, and when they got to Sinai, they could breathe. Sinai is a natural place. It's far away from anything. We went to Sinai, and it is the most desolate place I've ever been. We spent 5 hours riding on a bus through the middle of nowhere. We crossed the Suez Canal, and that was the last thing we seen until we got to Sinai. There is nothing but desert and bad roads. And they would work on the roads for a mile, and then not work on them for 5 miles, and then work on a road for a mile, and not work on them for 5 miles. And I wondered, why are they doing that? I have no idea. But it was just constant. Every 5 miles, you were in a construction zone. And it was incredible when we got to Sinai just how remote it is, how desolate it is. Go one slide, Lynn. This is, I wish that was bigger. That's Mount Sinai in the background. And this is our hotel that we stayed in. It is right at the bottom of Mount Sinai. That pool, it was 22 degrees. That pool has ice in it. In January, it is not a place. We were the only ones at this resort. This is a resort. And in January, our little group of sojourners and tourists from Gateway Seminary, we were the only ones there. And it was 22 degrees. And the power went out. And they brought us Egyptian blankets, and we were actually warmer than we were with the heater on. But you didn't get out of bed, dude. It was cold. And Sinai is a place where Moses was called up the hill. And if you read part of it, we'll go into chapter 19. Let's just back up a little bit. One more slide, Lynn. And we can see that during the summer, Sinai is a real nice place to be. During the wintertime, you want to go somewhere else. Exodus 19:3-6. While Moses went up to God, the Lord called unto him out. The Lord called him out of the mountain, saying, "Thus you shall tell the house of Jacob and tell the people of Israel." Remember, in Egypt they still had the body of Jacob. The people identified as ancestors of Jacob. And they brought Jacob with them, his remains, to carry him to the promised land. And that was one of the major things they carried out of them. Tell the house of Jacob and tell the people of Israel, you yourselves have seen what I did to the Egyptians, and how I bore you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. Now, therefore, if you will indeed obey my voice and keep my covenant, you shall be a treasured possession among all peoples, for the earth is mine. And you shall be a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words you shall speak to the people of Israel. God heard their cries. He heard their cries, and he met them where they were. He came and delivered them. Now God has an expectation for Israel. What is the expectation? I told Nate today, I go, sounds like God extortion. All right, God delivered you, but now he wants you. It's not really extortion, it's God. He brought them out of captivity. He brought them into freedom. He brought them to a place of refuge. And now he wants them to be his people. And he wants a couple of things. Number one, he wants to be their only God. No more graven images. No more false gods. God is God, and he is the only one. He is God. He's their only God. And they are a new nation. They are a new people, a whole new society. They no longer are in captivity. They're going to have to figure out how to live without taskmasters. They're going to have to figure out how to live in freedom under God. They have a whole new culture. The Hebrew culture had been extinguished under Egyptian rule. They still carried some oral traditions. They still had a minute fraction of who they were when Israel, Jacob, came to Egypt 400 years before that. They had a dear sense of who Yahweh was and who they were. But Jacob's been dead for 4 centuries. And what they brought out of Egypt was what they were seeing God do. And he was revealing himself to them. They had a whole new culture, a whole new education. Do you realize that out of probably maybe 3 million, let's just say there's 3 million people, Moses is the only one with a formal education. They've been slaves. I'm not saying that there wasn't folks in Egypt that knew how to read and write, but it would only have been determined that they needed literacy in order to slave better in homes or in perhaps business situations. I figure if I'm Egypt and I need somebody to speak Egyptian and write it and read it because he's my slave, then he's going to learn, whether he likes it or not. But Moses was the only one that had a formal education. And yet we see as we go to Joshua and go forward that Joshua says, bring me the book so that I can read. All right, Joshua was first generation coming out of Egypt. Joshua says, bring me the book. Imagine if you're Moses and you love all these people, and here's these people. If I'm Moses, one of the first things I'm going to start is schools. I'm going to teach Israel how to read and write. I'm going to teach them more than about freedoms, about how to think for themselves. It's a whole new education, new standards. They have a whole complete new standard that they're going to live by, and that those traditions that came from Sinai are still prevalent in Hebrew society today. They're a new nation, and God has given them a new nation in order to be able to sustain themselves and to become like the sands of the sea and the stars in the sky again, and a favored people. So this is kind of the story of how we get, and you know this story well. I've always loved this story. It's one of the first memories I have in Sunday school, a little bitty kid and flannel graph of Moses and the Egyptians in the chariots, and the teacher would move the flannel graph and chase Moses across the blue backing, right? Hey, you guys remember that? All of you? Flannel graph was amazing because those visual is better than a screen. Because we could go up and move. Afterwards, the teacher didn't care if we ran the chariots over with Moses' donkey. All right, it was okay. We got to play with the flannel graph and reenact it ourselves. And one of the first things I remember is this story of the Exodus and how God delivered his people. And the teacher said in 4- and 5-year-olds that God delivered Israel like he wants to deliver us. So this deliverance story has some dynamics to it that are always up for debate and discussion. And I think Nate and I probably agree as much as anybody else alive that I know that agrees with me on this. And we've talked about this a ton. We started the Ten Commandments, it seems like years ago. It probably almost is. Nate and I have had these discussions for a decade about this, and it's one of my favorite parts. And the Exodus, is part of Egyptian history. Egypt's hold to it. The legends of the plagues are Egyptian history. Part of Egyptian history is the legend of the plagues. Archaeology proof of I want you to understand what we see of archaeology in America on Nat Geo or the whatever learning channels you use. It is a fraction of what's actually in Egypt, Israel, and Jordan, along the Red Sea and into Egypt and up the Nile River. Every mile is a 4,000-year-old Egyptian temple, tomb, city, relics. It's everywhere. There were more Egyptians 4,000 years ago than there are Egyptians today in Egypt. They were spread out. They went everywhere up and down the Nile and into the desert, all the way around the Red Sea, all the way into Petra and into Jordan. And it was a fascinating society, and there was so much of it. And so much of the archaeology in Egypt proves the deliverance in the Exodus. Oral tradition, where the Red Sea parted. This was the most impressive thing to me, a verification of the Exodus story while we were traveling along the bottom of the Red Sea. You're in Egypt, and you stop and you get the Red Sea. Flip a slide, Lynn. Let's see if we can get Sherry in the Red Sea here. This is us at the Sphinx. Amazing place to be. One more, Lynn. Sherry, you can see the Sphinx in there in the bottom of the pyramid. One more, Lynn. This is a good slide. I don't know how well you can see that. That is a wall, one of 1,000 walls of Egyptian pictorial language. And up at the top in the center, you can see the Templars' cross from the 11th century. Everywhere you look, we came to a wall that was like this, except at the bottom of the wall was Hebrew writing. And we saw this several times, of a wall that was an Egyptian mural made for the Egyptians. And at the top, the Templars' cross from the 11th century, and at the bottom, Hebrew writing from slaves that were in captivity that put their own mark on Egyptian stuff. But when you go around the bottom of the Red Sea and you're in Egypt, our Egyptologist, who was one of the premier Southern Baptist Egyptologists, says this is where the Egyptians believe Moses crossed the Red Sea. All right, they have no doubt in their mind that story is real. And the Egyptians say, we've scuba Steve down there, and we've seen the wreckage of chariots here in this part of the Red Sea. This is where the Red Sea parted, and they left Egypt. This is where they crossed. And then you go into Israel, and Israel is just right next door around the bottom of the Red Sea, coming around, and Israel says, no, this is where they crossed on their way to Sinai. This is where it happened here. And then you go into Jordan. I remember this is two Muslim countries and Israel in the middle. And Jordan says, this is where we found the wreckage of the chariots. This is where the Red Sea was parted. They have no doctrinal issue with whether or not the Red Sea was parted. They just want to take credit for it here. This is where it happened. And if you could get enough scuba gear and some good lights, you'd go down there and see chariot wheels. I don't know that in the Red Sea that chariot wheels and chariot bodies would survive 4 millennia, but they say it's there. Moses returned to Egypt. Remember, when Moses returned to Egypt, he was afraid. And what did God tell him? Everyone who wanted to kill you is dead now. All right, Moses was well established, and the reigning Pharaoh was Moses' nephew. His mother, his stepmother that adopted him from the river, is now the princess of Egypt. In history, and I won't bore you with the details, Nate has overwhelmed me with details this week, but she is the only one. She's the only woman ruler that could be called the princess of Egypt during that dynasty of the 8th dynasty of Egypt. Moses is still part of the reigning body. And Moses' gain to royalty was through his stepmother, who is Hatshepsut. One more slide, Lynn. I hope this turns out well. Let's see one more. Oh, I want my mummy. All right. Click again. I want my mummy. One more. I want my mummy. All right, I want you to know, how many mummies do you think are in Egypt? I have figured just a few. They must be rare. All right, when we spent a couple of days in Cairo, and we went to the Egyptian Museum, and there are literally thousands of these stacked. I wandered around, and you can just walk around and touch them. I touched this one. It's the unusual part of Egypt. If you go to a car show in Upland of 1960 Mustangs, what's the number one rule when you go to the car show? Don't touch. All right, when we go to Egypt, some of the statues and some of the antiquities are worn off from the last 100 years of people capitalizing on tourism. And if you see a statue of the Egyptian like this, they're dead. All right, if it's like this, the foot's forward, they're still walking. So the statue was carved while they're still alive. The toes are worn out, not from time of 4,000 years, because the rest of the statue is perfectly intact, from people touching it. We'd go into Valley of the Kings and places like Luxor. Luxor is 2 miles of antiquities, and you walk down the main street, and it's this and everything you expect. And the corners of the antiquities are worn off from people turning and their pant leg brushing by and wearing out the antiquities. It is absolutely amazing. One more, Lynn. This is Hatshepsut's mortuary and temple This is Moses' mother's temple. And the Egyptians, the proof of all of this, all right, is in the antiquities and the relics that we find in Egypt. To me, I found proof of it. The Egyptian culture is firm that Moses was the building supervisor for his mother's mortuary. Moses was the guy. If you could pan from that and go over this way, you see another tomb and another smaller one of these carved into the hill that is Moses' tomb. Moses was designing his own tomb while he built his mother's tomb. Up to the age of 40, Moses was a predominant person in Egypt. And this mortuary to me was proof in the pudding that Israel was in captivity in Egypt. If you can pan around the other way and look down in the valley, you see this huge valley, almost like coming off the ridge route, dropping down into Bakersfield, and you just see this huge, vast valley where Israel was encamped. And I wish I could show you on my phone or my tablet, even just go door to door, but we can't. We don't have time for that. And so you have to trust me of the magnitude of this. This building is about the length of a football field carved into a wall. All right, there is no concrete masonry in this building. It is carved out of the wall, so there was no room for mistake. And Sherry and I have 1,000 pictures of this, but Sherry and I, you walk up there and you can go inside and sit on the portico and touch everything. It is such living history. And I realized that I was in a sacred place. The Egyptians will tell you that this is where Moses killed the taskmaster. This is the place. And this is a place that's also in the middle of nowhere. And Moses fled to the wilderness. The wilderness is across the street. It's right there. It didn't take long for them to get there. Most of the debates of the Exodus are from somewhere else besides Egypt. Egyptology, to me, I guess that's one of the points of the history. If I had to make apologetics for the Exodus, I would say that the place where the Exodus occurred from 4,000 years later still agrees with it. Egyptians will tell you the story of Moses. It might have a little different slant, but the Exodus is a real story. Our Egyptologist showed me with great confidence, as an Egyptian, that this is where the Israelites camped. This is where they lived. This is where they served. Well, they built this. And if you get a chance, the spelling is, so that's on video, Hatshepsut. Hat, Shep, Suit. Hat, like a hat. Shep, like shepherd. S-U-T, like suit. Google it. You'll be amazed at this place. It serves absolutely no purpose other than to be a mortuary for Moses' stepmother. And the Egyptians are in complete agreement that this was not only project managed by Moses, but this was his stepmother's mortuary. The debates about the Exodus and the deliverance of Israel do not start in Egypt. It is part of their history also. So I guess as we've looked at this and we make a defense, an apologetic for the Exodus, we always have a minute, I guess, to reflect on how does it matter to us? What's that matter to us other than a nice trip for Doug and Sherry? It was a nice trip, other than nice pictures to look at, all right, other than great memories. Why does it matter? I realized while we were in Exodus, while we were in Egypt, that God has delivered me from bondage. Whether we've been strung out on dope, whether we were abused, whether we steal, kill, and destroy, all of us have been delivered from something. Some folks don't seem to be so bad. And when you hear their testimony, you find out that they had murder in their heart. they weren't so good, and God delivered them. He still desires to deliver us from bondage, and He has led us to a place of refuge. Just like in Sinai, it is so secluded, and they had everything that they could need in Sinai. One of the stories of Sinai is you don't want to spend the winter there. It's cold. I can attest to that fact. It is cold. And the proof archaeologically of Israel being in Sinai for years is in their migration pattern in the wintertime down to the Red Sea. And those encampments, so according to Egyptology, the Israelites camped in Sinai for half the year, and then they all migrated to the Red Sea for half a year. And when we looked at the infrastructure, and our Egyptologists showed us the dirt, the rocks, the cisterns, the roads, the buildings for 2 million people to house there, and then commute down, and we went to the Red Sea, and there it is again. The same exact thing, 100 miles away, down into the Red Sea, where they built another camp. So this is Egyptology theory, and I don't know about wandering in the wilderness for 40 years. I used to think they just kind of randomly wandered around, right? It says they wandered in the wilderness for 40 years. I always took that as like being lost, right? I kind of thought they didn't know where they were going. They had no clue. They wandered around. Actually, according to Egypt, they traveled back and forth between the Red Sea and Sinai, and that's where they spent their winters and summers. And it was wandering because it was not their home. It was not the place where they were supposed to be. They were supposed to be in the Promised Land, and they were somewhere else. That's a theory that I like. I'm not wagering anything on it, but I like that theory. It makes sense. And I have witnessed the foundations and the infrastructure of great cities on both that almost look like they were carbon copies. It's kind of an amazing thing. God has led us to a place of refuge. For me, that's you. That's our church. That's my family that's been infiltrated with the gospel and has changed my family dynamic into something that is a place of refuge. How many times do we deal with folks that their house has no peace? Their house has no rest. They can't wait to get out of there. I talk with fathers who don't want to come home to their wife and children because they've brought no peace to it. I talk to mothers that are leaving because the place where they live is in danger. It's a danger to them. There's no peace. When the gospel infiltrates a family, it brings a place of refuge, just like God led Israel out of Egypt to a place of refuge. And guess what? This home is not our where we are wandering here. We are sojourns in this life. And our hope is that we will end up in the Promised Land, just like the Israelites did. He expects us to worship Him and only Him. It's no different when we read Exodus 19. And the Lord said, "You belong to me. You are my chosen people. You're the only ones that are chosen and precious to me, and I am going to be your only God." We go back to the first verse. I am the Lord your God. I am the Lord your God. I brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. You'll have no other gods before me. We're responsible for that also, and we get bogged down in that we don't make idols. I don't carve images. I don't have any graven paintings on my walls. All right, we have anything that comes between us and God is an idol. I preached on this a year and a half ago. A year. The second commandment. What's an idol? Anything that I establish before God. And finally, He will secure our future right in the palms of His hand. There's a catchy little spiritual. He's got the whole world in his hands. The little bitty baby and the big old Dougie, all of them are right there in the palm of his hands. I don't know about the theology of that actually, but I think it's evident that when he controls where the flies go during a plague, he does have us in our hands, in his hands, and we are secure in that, just as Israel was secured that they were going to continue to exodus to the promised land. Any questions about, I can take questions now, right? I can. Any questions about our trip or the things I've seen or the things I've said or interesting things that are stupid that you want to talk about? I'm here. I love to talk about stupid stuff, so. Our,
It seems to me like the Israelites were at times a lot more religious than we are.
I guess they were expected to. I don't know. That's probably a good observation. I have never. Our deliverance of our captivity is spiritual. Their deliverance of their captivity was both, and probably emotional too. Probably physical, spiritual, and emotional. You know, I suppose it would make them, but yet it didn't take them but a minute to quit being properly religious and turn back to their own wicked ways. So I don't know that they were any. I actually think that men and women walking upright are the same as men and women today walking upright. I don't think anything's changed that much. We were in 13 days. So we spent 4 days on the Nile River on a boat. And I didn't put any pictures of that in because it's almost disgusting how great that was. And so we left. We flew into Cairo, and then we caught a plane, and we flew. You go to the south end of the river, and you cruise back north. And so we went to Luxor and a dozen other places. We sailed on traditional boats, on a sailboat. I mean, we had a river boat, like you see, and it was a river cruise. It was opulent. I thought it was pretty cool. The food was not as good as a princess cruise. After 4 days, I told Sherry, I go, you think they'll let me in the kitchen and make something else? They kind of, it's Egypt. And what they think is luxury, Americans think as leftovers. And so the only drawback I had of the whole trip was I was jonesing to cook me a breakfast. So, but the food was good. It was edible. We didn't eat any greens or any lettuce because we were probably not able to drink the water. And so a big 1 liter bottle of water was about 40 cents American. So we bought waters a lot and probably spent $3 a day on water. It's not a big deal. But yeah, we were there 11 days, 4 days on the boat, and then we started touring a bus tour. And I'm not a huge fan of bus tours. I like to get in a car and drive, but I was glad I was on a bus. It was good. And armed guard the whole time. Always on the bus was at least one guy. And when we switched to the bus, the guy that I showed you was our security on the boat. And they didn't ride the boat with us. They'd get us on the boat, and they'd get in little Toyota Land Cruisers, and they'd all zip to where we were going. And they were there before us. And so they'd probably drive all night, I guess. And then you wouldn't know. We stopped in Luxor, and I got a little claustrophobic. And I started, because there really is walls of just, and people going both ways. And so I told Sherry, I got to go sit out. And I just walked out and walked out to this little plaza where there was benches. And I wasn't there 10 seconds, and here comes Rasad, and he's going, you want to smoke? And I went, no, thank you, brother, I don't smoke. He goes, mind if I do? I went, he goes, you're not allowed to wander off without me. And I went, he goes, you can go anywhere you want to go, but next time just don't make me find you. I went, okay, that's cool. After that on the bus, they put on instead of having an army type uniform, they put on suits, but there was an Uzi, and those guys had real Uzis, new ones, that he had down his side. And so we were always under armed protection. And we'd we'd go through checkpoints like you would see in a bad country, but the guns with Humvees and half-tracks and tanks, and always the guns were pointed away from us, all right, to protect us. And the army is there, and the police are there to protect tourists. They are not there for the Egyptian citizen. You're on your own. We went through Israel on this trip and spent a day at the bottom. It is the part of Israel that most tourists don't see, because we were on our way to Jordan to go and do part of Petra and some other Jordanian things. Petra is the highlight in Jordan, but we got to go through Israel, and they give you a little page for your passport, because some places won't let you in if you've been to Israel. And so I wanted my passport stamped. I'm not ashamed that I've been in Israel, but they won't. So I have a page that's in my passport that has my Israeli stamp on it. And I guess if I was going to Russia or somewhere, I don't know where, but there are places where I would remove that from my passport and whatever.
Why can't you go, why were they afraid Biden coming the second time?
Like a second time back to Israel? I'd love to go back to Israel. This is not a good time to go traveling in the Holy Land or in the Middle East. Unfortunately, there's too much unrest. And so would I go, if I had an opportunity to go next week, I'll stay in America. I'm gonna stay right here.
I'm asking, why didn't they want you to come back? I mean, one time it's okay, the second time you had a problem, why?
No, I didn't have any problem. The Israel, whenever you cross a border, an international border, they stamp your passport. All right, in Israel, if I have an Israeli stamp in my passport, it may disqualify me from entering other nations that are anti-Israel. Okay, and so I want that. I want that. Your passport is your souvenir of your life, and so I wanted that stamp in there, but instead I have a page. Nate, am I done? Yeah, I'm done. Thank you. Thanks, you guys.
If you do me a favor and just sit up front there.
Sure.
I'm going to turn the camera off
Okay.
and take 5 minutes to talk about Kernville and pray for you.
Oh, that's good. Thanks. What do you know about Kernville?
Danny, could you turn the stream off for me, please? Thanks, Doug. I want to turn the camera off.